Before the baby, before marriage, before the roller coaster of heartbreak and healing, there was just hustle. Pure, unadulterated drive. This is the story of Chukwudi and Ifeoma, two souls forged in the same fire, long before they ever met. He grew up in Nsukka, she in Aba. Different towns, but the same reality. The kind of upbringing where you learn the true value of a 100 naira note before you even master your multiplication tables. They both came from homes where love was abundant, but money was a tightrope act, where parents stretched so little to cover so much. This shared childhood planted a seed in both of them, a fierce determination to build a different future. So, by the time university came around, neither Chukwudi nor Ifeoma believed in waiting for handouts or relying solely on a monthly allowance. They knew that to change their story, they had to start writing the next chapter themselves. At the prestigious University of Nigeria, Nsukka, Chukwudi wasn't just a student. He was a phenomenon. He quickly became known as the connector. If you needed anything on campus, you went to Chukwudi. A phone charger? He had it. A last-minute haircut before a date? He knew a guy. A second-hand laptop to type your final project? He could source it. Even if you needed your assignment printed at 2 a.m., Chukwudi was your man. He started small, with a keen eye for opportunity. On weekends, he'd take a bus to the bustling Og Beat Market in Enugu, buy phone accessories in bulk, and bring them back to campus. He'd sell them with a small, fair markup, building a reputation for reliability. By his third year, he wasn't just Chukwudi anymore. His friends had given him a new name, one that stuck. Chuck's the Plug. He was unapologetically business-minded, strategic, and bold. He carried a small, worn-out notebook everywhere. It was his Bible. In it, he meticulously wrote down every single sale, every person who owed him money, and every brilliant idea that flashed into his mind. He dreamed of opening a printing center, starting an event promotion brand, you name it. Academically, he wasn't the top student, but in the University of Life, he was acing every course. Everyone on campus, from students to lecturers, respected his drive. He was always thinking 3 steps ahead. But beneath that confident, energetic exterior was a quiet, profound determination. He would never, ever return to the kind of poverty he had witnessed as a boy. Meanwhile, hundreds of kilometers away at Abia State Polytechnic, Ifeoma was carving out her own empire with a different kind of hustle. Where Chukwudi sold gadgets and connections, Ifeoma sold creativity and skill. From her very first year, she turned her small corner of the hostel into a bustling salon. She started braiding hair for her fellow students, her fingers moving with a speed and precision that was simply mesmerizing. She was fast, her work was impeccably neat, and she was always polite. Most importantly, her prices were fair. Word of her talent spread like wildfire. Soon, girls from other hostels were knocking on her door, asking for that small fine girl that plaits like a Lego stylist. She saved every kobo she could, reinvesting her profits into better hair tools and products. But she didn't stop there. Her creativity was a wellspring that couldn't be contained. She devoured online tutorials, teaching herself how to make beautiful beaded slippers and customized jewelry. What started as a hobby soon became another thriving business. By her final year, she wasn't just selling to students. She was supplying her handmade accessories to small boutiques in the commercial hubs of Aba and Umuahia. Ifeoma possessed the same hunger as Chukwudi, a deep, quiet fire to rise above her circumstances, to build a life of her own design. 2 different paths, but one shared mindset. Their worlds were destined to collide. The setting was an inter-campus entrepreneurship conference in Enugu, a melting pot of young, ambitious minds. Chukwudi was there representing his school's business club, a natural role for Chuck's the Plug. Ifeoma had tagged along with a friend who was presenting a project, curious to learn and network. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something deeper, something more resonant. It was admiration at first conversation. He was captivated by the way she spoke about business, her eyes alight with passion, her hands gesturing expressively as she explained her grand vision for a women's fashion brand. He saw a mirror of his own ambition in her, and she noticed how he listened, really listened. He wasn't just waiting for his turn to speak or trying to impress her. He was absorbing her words, asking thoughtful questions, genuinely trying to understand her world. There was an immediate and powerful connection, a recognition of a kindred spirit. By the end of the conference, They had exchanged phone numbers. The pretense was business, but the spark was undeniable. Their initial chats were a flurry of ideas about suppliers, market trends, and growth strategies. But slowly, those business-focused conversations started stretching late into the night. Professional admiration blossomed into genuine friendship. Friendship warmed into shared laughter and inside jokes. And then, inevitably, it deepened into something more. Even as they fell in love, their shared hustle remained the bedrock of their bond. Their dates weren't just movies or romantic dinners. They were brainstorming sessions. They would dream up and launch small ventures together, designing and selling custom t-shirts for campus events, starting a snack delivery service for students burning the midnight oil, or printing and distributing flyers for local businesses. Their relationship was a partnership in every sense of the word. They weren't just boyfriend and girlfriend. They were co-conspirators in the grand project of building a better life. They pushed each other, celebrated each other's wins, and picked each other up after every setback. Their love story wasn't written in whispered sweet nothings, but in the shared ink of their business ledgers and the mutual respect for each other's grind. They were hustlers in love, and together, they felt invincible, ready to take on the world. Love is sweet, Chakotay would often joke, but money adds flavor. And Ifeoma would laugh, her eyes sparkling with the same hunger for success, replying, "Then let's cook our love with plenty of flavor." This shared drive was the glue that bound them. By their final year, they were inseparable, not just as lovers, but as business partners. They called themselves Team Progress. While other students partied, their evenings were spent under a large mango tree behind the Faculty of Arts. That tree became their first office. With just one bench, one notebook, and two restless minds, they sketched out their future. "Imagine if we had our own brand," Chakotay would muse, his pen tapping excitedly. "A one-stop shop for shirts, flyers, posters." Ifeoma's imagination would immediately catch fire. And a fashion corner right beside it. "My designs, your prints." It would be perfect. They'd laugh, share some groundnuts, and dream those big, bold dreams that only the young and determined can truly understand. But they were more than just dreamers, they were doers. On weekends, they became campus entrepreneurs. Their small table outside the hostel transformed into a bustling mini-business hub. Chakotay would be on the phone, bargaining with suppliers in Enugu for the best printing deals, while Ifeoma managed the creative designs and made sure every custom t-shirt and tote bag reached its new owner. During the stressful exam season, they pivoted, providing photocopies, spiral bindings, and past exam questions for students cramming last minute. Everyone on campus knew them as that couple that's always busy but always smiling. Sure, they had their disagreements, arguments over pricing or tight deadlines. But even in their quarrels, there was a deep, unwavering respect. They didn't just love each other. They truly believed in each other's potential. Graduation came, and like many, they didn't have much to their names. But what they did have was savings, small, hard-earned, and filled with the promise of their shared vision. With his share, Chakotay dived headfirst into opening a small printing and branding shop in Enugu, which he proudly named Chuck's Graphics. He became a man of all trades, printing everything from business cards to wedding souvenirs, often working late into the night, fueled by coffee and determination. Meanwhile, Ifeoma returned to her hometown of Aba, the bustling commercial heart of the East, to launch Fioma Collections. Her shop was a vibrant showcase of her talent, filled with ready-made outfits, handcrafted slippers, and unique jewelry. The beginning was tough, as it always is. There were slow days with no customers and frustrating moments when essential machines would break down. But they were each other's lifeline. When Chakotay's main printer failed, threatening his business, Ifeoma didn't hesitate to send a part of her precious savings to help him get it fixed. And when a supplier from Lagos delayed a crucial delivery for Ifeoma, Chakotay sprang into action, designing and printing new promotional flyers for her, free of charge, to help her relaunch and regain momentum. They were more than lovers. They were each other's strategic partners, biggest cheerleaders, and most trusted mentors. Though they were in two different cities, their vision remained one. Every Sunday evening was sacred. They'd spend hours on the phone, their conversations weaving seamlessly between sweet nothings and serious business strategy. "How were sales this week?" Chakotay would ask. People are loving the Ankara tote bags. Ifeoma would report back. You should print some branded ones for me. I can design your new business cards for free. Just cover the materials, he'd offer. Deal. She'd reply without a second thought. They shared ideas openly, learning from each other's triumphs and setbacks. Even with the distance, they were building their empire together. Their ultimate goal was what they called the Vision Project, a grand, joint fashion imprint studio, a single building where creativity and commerce would meet. Chukwudi even had a small cardboard vision board hanging in his shop, covered in sketches, notes, and swatches of fabric, a tangible reminder of their shared dream. As their businesses flourished, so did their bond. The distance felt smaller as they began visiting each other more frequently. Their weekends were a blend of romance and planning, discussing not just profits, but their future, marriage, children, and the better life they were so diligently building. One evening, walking down a quiet street in Enugu, Ifeoma turned to him and said, "Do you know what I love about us? We don't just talk about love, we build it, brick by brick, naira by naira." Chukwudi smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's the only way it lasts," he replied. In that moment, they felt invincible, believing their hustle and love could conquer anything. They didn't know then that the strongest empires, even those built on love, require more than just hard work. They require patience, peace, and a level of emotional control they had yet to be tested on. But for now, they were happy, two ambitious souls from humble beginnings, shaping their own destiny with faith and sheer determination. Eventually, the time came to close the distance. Before they were officially married, Ifeoma made the move to Enugu to live in Chukwudi's apartment. It was a carefully planned decision, the next logical step in their journey. Her business in ABA was doing well, but the allure of running their dreams side by side, under one roof, was too beautiful to resist. The apartment was modest, one living room, one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, but to them, it was a palace. They affectionately called it our workshop of dreams. Every corner was a testament to their hustle. Rolls of fabric were stacked neatly in the living room. Piles of printing paper occupied a corner of the hallway, and Ifeoma's sewing machine sat proudly beside the television. The constant hum of the generator often filled the night air as they worked side by side, one pressing a new design onto a shirt, the other cutting banners for a client. Love was definitely in the air, but it was thick with the scent of exhaustion. Their days started before the sun. By 6:30 a.m., Chukwudi was already out the door, rushing to his shop to meet an early bird client. Ifeoma would stay behind, ironing dresses and carefully packing orders for delivery before heading to her own nearby workspace. It was a relentless cycle of work, a whirlwind of activity from dawn till dusk. And as the days turned into weeks, the very thing that brought them together, their shared ambition, they de-text each other during the day, small check-ins between deadlines. "Have you eaten? Customer stressed me out today. I miss you." But by the time they both returned home at night, they were too tired for anything else. Sometimes, they would just sit on the floor eating noodles. Barely talking before sleep pulled them apart. The love was still there, but it had become quiet, buried under invoices, customers, and the constant hum of survival. One evening, Chukwudi came home late and found her asleep on the couch, her head resting on a pile of unfinished dresses. He just stood there, staring, not with anger, but with guilt. He realized they hadn't had a real conversation in days. He sat beside her quietly until she woke up. "Chucks, you're back," she murmured, half asleep. He smiled sadly. "Yes, but are we really back home? Or just resting between work?" She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean, when was the last time we just sat, talked, and breathed? We live together, but I feel like we're only seeing each other in passing." Her eyes softened. She nodded slowly. "I felt that too." They sat there in silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the room. Then she said, "Let's take one day off. No sewing, no printing. Just us." He agreed. "Deal." They chose a Wednesday, midweek, when clients were least demanding. They locked the shop, switched off their phones, and decided to stay home all day. It felt strange at first, as though they were breaking some sacred rule of productivity. But soon, laughter returned. They cooked breakfast together, played old Nigerian songs on her phone, and teased each other about who worked harder. By afternoon, they lay side by side, talking about everything they hadn't had time for, their dreams, their fears, their childhood memories. For a moment, life slowed down. They realized that they didn't need fancy dates or big outings. All they needed was each other's time. That day became a turning point, a reminder that in a city that never stops moving, love must learn how to pause. Afterward, they promised each other something simple yet sacred. No matter how busy life became, they would always find time to stop and reconnect. It wasn't easy. Work didn't magically slow down, but they tried. Sometimes it meant sitting together in silence while eating akara by the roadside. Sometimes it was just holding hands on their way home from the market. Those small moments became their anchor. And though they didn't know it then, those simple choices to pause and reconnect would become the very thing that kept them together through storms they could not yet see coming. Marriage had only been a conversation, not a date. Chikwudi and Ifeoma had talked about it countless times. Soon, when business is stable, when we're more prepared. But like many hardworking couples, life kept giving them more reasons to wait. Then one morning, everything changed. For weeks, Ifeoma had been feeling weak. She thought it was stress from overworking, the late nights at her sewing machine, the endless errands for clients. But when her period didn't come the second month, her heart began to pound. She tried to ignore it at first, telling herself it might just be hormonal. But deep down, she knew. That afternoon, while Chikwudi was at the shop, she went to a nearby pharmacy and bought a pregnancy test kit. Her hands trembled as she waited for the result. And when two bold red lines appeared, the world seemed to blur around her. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, tears rolling down her cheeks. When Chikwudi returned home that evening, she was unusually quiet. He noticed immediately. "Babe, what's wrong?" he asked, setting down his bag. She didn't answer. Her eyes were puffy, and she was twisting the hem of her blouse nervously. "Ifeoma," he said softly, "talk to me. Did someone offend you?" "Did a customer?" She suddenly blurted out. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, silence filled the room. He blinked, trying to process what he just heard. "You're sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded, tears falling freely. "I did the test. Twice." Then, her voice broke as she whispered, "What if you don't marry me, Chucks? What will people say? I can't face my family like this." He looked at her, the woman who had stood beside him through school, through business struggles, through late nights and countless dreams. And suddenly, he smiled. He walked up to her and held her hands. Then he laughed softly, the kind of laugh that came from relief. "Why are you crying like this, Ifeoma? You think I'll run away because of this?" She sniffed, confused. "But I don't want to give birth outside wedlock. I don't want people to talk." He cupped her face in his palms. "Listen to me. You haven't ruined anything. You've just made my plans faster. I already wanted to marry you. Now I just have more reason to." This story is a beautiful reminder that love isn't about grand gestures, but about the small, consistent choices we make to stay connected. Even when life gets overwhelming, taking a moment to pause and be present with the one you love can make all the difference. In the weeks that followed, the vague idea of someday transformed into a whirlwind of active planning. Both families were informed. And yes, there were whispers, there were raised eyebrows, but the couple's love for each other stood as a firm shield against the quiet judgment. They set the wedding for just 3 months later. It wasn't going to be the grand, extravagant ceremony they had once dreamed of, but it was going to be theirs, intimate, heartfelt, and brimming with hope. Every night, as they sat together planning the details, Ifeoma would gently place her hand on her belly, a shy, happy smile gracing her lips. Sometimes, she would whisper to the little life growing inside her, "You came a little earlier than we planned, little one, but maybe God knows best." And from across the room, Chikwudi would watch her, a silent prayer of gratitude in his heart. He couldn't believe his luck. Heaven had blessed him with both the woman of his dreams and the perfect reason to finally stop delaying his destiny. News of the pregnancy, as news often does, spread faster than they had anticipated. At first, both families were taken by surprise. Ifeoma's mother, especially, sat in stunned silence for several long minutes when she heard. "You mean, you're already 2 months gone?" she asked softly, her voice heavy with a mix of emotions. Ifeoma nodded, unable to meet her mother's gaze. Her mother let out a long, slow sigh. It wasn't a sigh of anger, but one of quiet resignation. "My daughter," she said, "this isn't how I hoped it would happen for you. But if he's serious about you, then we move forward." And he was serious. Incredibly so. Within a week, Chakotay, accompanied by his uncle and two respected elders, made a formal visit to her family in ABA. He didn't come empty-handed. He brought traditional gifts of drinks and cola nuts, and even a small envelope for her parents, a gesture to show he meant business. Ifeoma's father, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "If you truly love my daughter," he said, his voice firm, "then marry her properly. There's no need for long talk." And just like that, with a simple declaration, the preparations began in earnest. It was a whirlwind. A beautiful, chaotic, exhausting whirlwind. Between the growing baby, their demanding businesses, and the wedding planning, their days blurred into a single, continuous motion. There were traditional clothes to be sewn, invitation cards to be designed and printed, a venue to be booked. And since they were both proud entrepreneurs, they insisted on handling most of the details themselves, a testament to their self-reliant spirit. "Let's print our own invitation cards in my shop," Chakotay announced proudly one evening. "There's no need to waste money outside." Ifeoma, rubbing her small but growing baby bump, replied with a smile. "And I'll sew my own traditional outfit." It all sounded so perfect, so beautifully symbolic at first. But as the wedding date loomed closer, the immense pressure began to show, creating tiny cracks in their perfect plan. The surge of pregnancy hormones made Ifeoma incredibly sensitive. Small things that she would normally brush off now felt like monumental issues. A delayed phone call, a careless word, even a forgotten errand could easily upset her. One afternoon, she stormed into his bustling printing shop, her face a mask of frustration. "Chakotay, you promised to bring the lace fabric for my bridesmaids yesterday. I've been waiting all day." He looked up from the noisy printing machine, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Babe, please calm down. The supplier delayed me. I told you that. Don't tell me to calm down," she snapped, her voice rising. "If you really cared, you would have found a way. You always have an excuse for everything." A few of his workers nearby shifted uncomfortably, trying to busy themselves. He took a deep breath, fighting the urge to raise his voice in the middle of his shop. "Ifeoma, please. I'm working. We can talk about this at home." But she was already in tears. It wasn't just about the fabric, of course. It was everything. The constant tiredness, the unpredictable hormones, the gnawing fear that everything was moving too fast, that they were losing control. Later that night, as she tried to apologize, he stopped her. He simply pulled her into a hug and whispered, "It's okay. You're carrying both of us right now. I can handle a little shouting." His understanding and patience were the balm her anxious heart needed. During one of her dress fittings, she sat quietly, rubbing her belly and feeling the gentle, reassuring kicks from within. Her mother came and sat beside her, her presence a silent comfort. "You're glowing, Ife," her mother said with a warm smile. Ifeoma managed a faint smile in return. "I'm trying, Mama. But sometimes I feel like everything is just too much. The wedding, the baby, all this pressure." Her mother took her hand, her touch gentle and firm. "Marriage is never about perfection, my daughter. It's about patience. If he truly loves you, he will learn you, all of you. And if you love him, you will keep learning him too." Those simple, wise words stayed with her, anchoring her through the chaotic days that followed. A week before the ceremony, they escaped the madness. They went to a quiet, secluded spot by the riverside, the same place they used to relax during their university days, the place where they had once mapped out their ambitious dreams. She leaned her head against his shoulder and said softly, "I still can't believe all of this is happening." He smiled, a familiar, easy smile. "You remember when we used to say we'd marry only after making it big?" She laughed, a genuine, light-hearted sound. "Now look at us. We haven't even finished hustling, and God has already added a double blessing." He placed his hand gently over hers on her belly. "Then we'll just keep hustling, for the three of us now." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the river, all the noise, the arguments, and the chaos of the preparations faded away. A simple, profound peace returned, reminding them that they were, and always would be, on the same side. The morning of the wedding arrived, bright and wonderfully loud. From the crack of dawn, music filled the compound. Pots and pans clanged in the backyard kitchen, and the cheerful, echoing voices of women filled the air. The small hall they had rented in Enugu was decorated in simple, but beautiful gold and cream. It was exactly what they wanted, a celebration that showcased their love, not their wealth. Chakotay stood by the mirror, adjusting his crisp white kaftan, a wide smile spreading across his face as he looked at his reflection. He could hardly believe the day was finally here. After all the struggles, the delays, the arguments, the stress, this was it. Their beginning. And then he saw her. As Ifeoma walked down the aisle, his heart softened completely. She was wearing a beautifully fitted lace gown that elegantly highlighted her small, precious bump. She looked absolutely radiant, glowing with a light that seemed to come from within. He whispered under his breath, a simple, heartfelt prayer. Thank you, Lord. This was his life, his family, his future. And it was perfect. If their journey touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your good wishes. The church was a symphony of joy. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and songs filled every corner with warmth. Our university friends were the loudest, their cheers a constant, happy roar. I saw my mother wiping away quiet tears, her face a mix of pride and nostalgia. And Chakotay's father, a man who rarely cracked a smile, beamed with a pride that lit up his entire face. The reception was a blur of color, sound, and movement. We danced until our feet ached, completely surrounded by a whirlwind of family and friends. Their voices created a chorus of celebration, shouting, couple goals, and our power couple don do am. In one corner, a mountain of gifts grew steadily higher. Photographers weaved through the crowd, their flashes like fireflies in the dimming light, while the MC's jokes sent waves of laughter rolling through the hall. On the surface, it was the picture of perfection. Every smile was bright, every laugh seemed genuine. But beneath it all, in bone-deep exhaustion was setting in. Weeks of frantic planning, the hidden stress of the pregnancy, and countless sleepless nights had finally caught up with us. As the evening wore on and the hall began to empty, I could barely keep my eyes open. Each blink felt heavier than the last. I was running on the fumes of pure happiness, and the tank was nearly empty. When we finally got back to our apartment, the silence was almost deafening. It was the first time in weeks the space hadn't been filled with the buzz of wedding preparations. I was still in my wedding dress, the zipper half undone, my makeup smudged from a long day of smiles and happy tears. I didn't even have the energy to change. I just sank onto the couch, letting out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire day. I'm so tired, I murmured, my voice barely a whisper. My legs feel like wood. Chakotay let out a soft laugh and sat down beside me, the couch dipping under his weight. You danced too much, Mrs. Chakotay. A faint smile touched my lips. I wanted to enjoy today. It's not every day one gets married. The title, Mrs. Chakotay, still felt new, a shiny new coat I was just trying on for size. He reached for my hand, his touch warm and reassuring, and brought it to his lips for a gentle kiss. You looked beautiful, he said, his eyes sincere. I'm lucky. We sat there in a comfortable silence for a while, the only sound being the distant, faint pops of fireworks somewhere in the city. The celebration was over, and it was just the two of us, finally alone. But my mind was still racing, a whirlwind of thoughts and anxieties. I hope we'll be okay. Chucks, I said quietly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He frowned slightly, turning to look at me properly. Why would you say that? I don't know. I whispered, the exhaustion making me feel vulnerable. Sometimes it feels like we've rushed everything. The baby, the business, the wedding, everything just came at once. It was a fear I had pushed down for weeks, but now, in the quiet of our new home, it surfaced. He let out a long breath and nodded slowly, considering my words. Maybe, he admitted. But we'll learn. We always do. His simple confidence was a balm to my frayed nerves. He was right. We had always found a way to figure things out, together. Later that night, as we started to unpack some of the gifts, the fragile piece we'd found was shattered. The exhaustion was a third person in the room, silently amplifying every small frustration. I asked him to help carry a heavy box of pots into the kitchen. It was a simple request, but it landed at the wrong moment. He was just as drained as I was. He rubbed his eyes and muttered, Babe, I'll do it later. Let me rest small. Normally, I would have understood. But tonight, it was different. My raging pregnancy hormones, my physical fatigue, and the emotional high of the day all collided at once. His words felt like a dismissal. You always say later, Chikwudi, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Everything is always later with you. You can't even help with small things. He rubbed his forehead, a look of weariness etched on his face. Ife, a beg. It's not that deep. I just said I'll rest first. But I was already on a roll, the dam of my pent-up frustrations breaking. You never listen, I accused, standing up to face him. Even during the planning, I did everything myself. He cut me off, his own voice sharp with frustration. Ifeoma, can we not start on our wedding night? Please. His words hung in the air, instantly dousing the fire of my anger. The room fell silent. I knew immediately that I'd gone too far, that I had let my exhaustion speak for me. But my pride, stubborn and unyielding, kept the apology locked in my throat. He was hurt. I could see it in his eyes, but he chose silence over escalating the fight. That night, we slept back to back. It wasn't because of a lack of love. It was the heavy, suffocating weight of misunderstanding, brought on by pure, unfiltered exhaustion. Ifeoma collections quickly became the talk of the town. Everyone, from brides-to-be and students to entire church choirs, flocked to her for their outfits. It was the dream they had whispered about under the mango tree back in school, finally coming to life. But this dream came with a heavy dose of exhaustion. Their small apartment started to look less like a home and more like a warehouse. Bolts of colorful fabric were stacked next to cartons of printing paper. Delivery bags and spools of sewing thread had claimed half of their living room. Every morning was a whirlwind. They'd rush through breakfast, their minds already buzzing with the day's tasks. Don't forget to buy ink for the printer, Ifeoma would call out while tying her scarf. And please, remind your supplier about the lace for that customer's asoebi. Chikwudi would reply, already packing his laptop. They had the best intentions, of course. They were building their future, brick by brick. But their conversations had shifted from whispers of love to the logistics of their businesses. By the time they returned home in the evening, they were both completely drained. She would sink into the couch, quietly rubbing her swollen feet. He would lie on the bed, his face lit by the glow of his phone as he scrolled through orders and customer messages. Some nights, silence was the only thing that filled the space between them before sleep took over. It wasn't out of anger, just pure, unadulterated exhaustion. Then came the pregnancy, bringing its own set of challenges. In the beginning, Ifeoma tried to maintain her usual relentless pace at the shop. But as her belly grew, simple tasks became monumental. Bending over to cut fabric or sitting at the sewing machine for hours became excruciating. Some days, the ache in her back was so intense that she would break down in tears right there in the middle of her work. Her apprentice would plead with her to rest, but she'd just shake her head, her voice firm. If I stop now, who will pay the rent? Who will buy the baby things? Back at home, Chikwudi did his best to help. He started taking on small chores, washing the dishes, fetching water, and sometimes even managing to cook noodles or boil some yam. But he was under immense pressure himself. His biggest client, a political candidate, had a constant stream of overnight jobs. Missing a single deadline could mean losing a major contract and a significant chunk of their income. There were many nights when they were both wide awake at 2 a.m., the soft hum of the generator their only companion. He would be printing flyers, the machine churning out political promises, while she sat nearby, hand-stitching intricate details onto a dress. As the months crept by, a quiet, unspoken distance began to grow between them. They still loved each other deeply, there was no doubt about that. But the vibrant energy that once fueled their laughter and late-night talks was now being poured into mere survival. Sometimes, in a soft, tired voice, she would complain, "You don't even look at me anymore." And he would sigh, his own exhaustion palpable. "It's not like that, Ife. I'm just trying to make sure we're okay." Other times, he would come home to find her already asleep, one hand resting protectively on her round belly, her face peaceful but etched with fatigue. He would sit beside her in the quiet of the night and whisper, "I'm sorry, my love. I know I'm not always here, but everything I'm doing, it's for you and the baby." In the morning, she would wake up and find him asleep on the couch, his laptop precariously balanced on his chest. She'd de-cover him with a blanket and whisper the same sentiment back to the sleeping form of her husband. "I am sorry too. I know you're trying so hard for us." They were two soldiers fighting the same battle, just from different corners of the same small room. Yet, even in the midst of all the chaos, there were beautiful, fleeting moments that reminded them why they had started this journey together. On weekends, when business was slow, Chakotay would bring home roasted plantain and groundnut sauce, her absolute favorite, and they would sit together on their small balcony, just the two of them. They'd laugh about funny customer requests or dream about their baby's future. "What if it's a boy?" she would ask, her eyes sparkling. "Then he'll learn how to print by the time he's 10, he'd joke, a wide grin on his face. "And if it's a girl?" she'd counter. He'd smile, a soft, loving expression washing over his features. "Then she'll design dresses even better than you." These small, precious moments, though rare, were their lifeline. They were like quiet, flickering flames in a room filled with the deafening noise of their busy lives, keeping their connection alive. One night, as the rain poured down outside, drumming a gentle rhythm on their roof, Ifeoma turned to Chakotay and said softly, "Do you ever feel like we're chasing too much?" He looked at her, a hint of confusion in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "Between the businesses, the house, the baby coming, sometimes I forget how to just be. It feels like I'm always doing, never resting." He thought about her words for a moment, the rain a pensive soundtrack to his thoughts. Then he nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what growing up feels like. But you're right, we need to breathe." She smiled faintly, a wave of relief washing over her. "Then promise me, no matter how busy we get, we won't forget us." He reached for her hand, his grasp firm and reassuring. "I promise." The day Ifeoma went into labor, the apartment was unusually quiet. Chakotay was pacing back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, a whirlwind of nervous energy. He was trying to coordinate with the driver to get them to the hospital while also handling last-minute, urgent orders for his printing shop. Ifeoma held her belly tightly, each contraction making her wince in pain. "Chucks, help me," she whispered between labored breaths. He stopped pacing immediately. Everything else faded away. He rushed to her side, took her hand, and looked into her eyes. "I'm right here, Ife," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "We'll get through this together." At the hospital, everything became a blur of motion. Doctors and nurses hustled around them. Monitors beeped rhythmically, and Chakotay held her hand, his knuckles white, as Ifeoma's face contorted with pain and incredible determination. Hours stretched on, feeling like an eternity. And then, finally, the most beautiful sound in the world filled the delivery room, the first cries of a new life. It was a boy. Tears streamed down Chakotay's face as he held his son for the very first time. He was so small, so perfect. "You're safe, little one," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Mama did so well." Ifeoma, exhausted but glowing with a radiant light, smiled weakly from the bed. "I can't believe he's here," she murmured, her eyes fixed on their son. The first days were a whirlwind of joy and utter exhaustion. Feeding schedules, endless diaper changes, and sleepless nights became their new reality. Chakotay tried to help with the night feeds, but he still had shop deadlines to meet. Ifeoma's body was still recovering from childbirth, and she struggled with fatigue and the challenges of breastfeeding. The dream was real, but so was the struggle. They were no longer just building businesses. They were building a family, and that was the hardest, most beautiful project of all. Life with a newborn was beautiful, but it was also exhausting. Chakotay and Ifeoma had quickly realized that love alone couldn't cover the sleepless nights, the endless feeding schedules, and the looming work deadlines. Their businesses, the print shop and the fashion studio, still demanded their full attention, and neither of them could afford to slow down completely. Some mornings, Ifeoma would wake to a crying baby, just as Chakotay was rushing out the door to open the print shop for early orders. Other times, she'd be chained to her sewing machine while he scrambled to meet delivery deadlines, his phone ringing off the hook. The joy of their new baby was undeniable, but the stress was starting to build, casting a shadow over their happiness. At the printing shop, a big client suddenly demanded urgent flyers for a church event. It was a lucrative order, one Chakotay couldn't afford to turn down. He wanted to take it, but a wave of guilt washed over him. How could he leave Ifeoma alone with the newborn, especially when she was already so tired? Meanwhile, Ifeoma was falling behind on custom orders for her own fashion clients. Every time she glanced at the stack of unfinished dresses, a knot of guilt tightened in her stomach. Frustration simmered just beneath the surface. She felt like she was failing on all fronts, as a mother, as a wife, and as a business owner. Arguments started subtly, not with shouting, but with quiet, pointed remarks. Chikwudi would complain about a deadline she had promised she would meet. Ifeoma would resent him for taking yet another late-night printing job instead of coming home to rest and help. These weren't big fights, but the quiet tension made every small disagreement feel monumental, chipping away at their connection. One evening, after the baby had finally, blessedly, fallen asleep, Ifeoma sat on the balcony with her head in her hands. The cool night air did little to soothe her frayed nerves. "I don't even feel like myself anymore," she whispered to the darkness, the words heavy with exhaustion. Chikwudi joined her quietly, the floorboards creaking softly under his weight. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know, Ife," he said, his voice low and tired. "I feel it too. We're both stretched so thin. But we'll find a way. We have to, for us and for him." She looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sometimes I feel so guilty for being tired," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I should be happy. I should be grateful. But I can't keep up." He knelt beside her and took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You're not failing," he insisted. "We're learning. Every new parent feels this way. We just have to get better at this together." His words were a lifeline in her sea of doubt. Even in their shared exhaustion, they found small ways to keep their love alive, to remind themselves of the couple they were before the chaos. On some weekends, Chikwudi would fire up the grill and make her favorite catfish barbecue. They'd eat together on the balcony, their laughter quiet so as not to wake the baby, sharing stories from their day. As their son grew a little older, Ifeoma would sit and carefully braid his soft hair while Chikwudi worked on sketches for a new printing project nearby. They'd share ideas, crack jokes, and steal glances, finding comfort in each other's presence. They learned to take turns, one grabbing a short nap while the other watched the baby, just to reclaim a few precious minutes of rest. These small moments became their anchors, reminding them that even in the midst of chaos, love doesn't disappear. It just needs a little more attention. They were learning the true lesson of parenthood, and it wasn't just about joy. It was about learning to be patient when you felt like screaming, to be flexible when your plans fell apart, and to forgive each other for the small mistakes made under pressure. Their businesses could still grow, their dreams could still be achieved, but they realized it was only possible if they leaned on each other. Every night, as they stood over their son's crib, watching him sleep so peacefully, they would whisper the same promise to each other and to him. "We'll do better. We'll stay together. We'll make it work, no matter how hard it gets." It was in those quiet, tired nights that Chikwudi and Ifeoma discovered a new kind of love, one built not on ease, but on effort, sacrifice, and an unwavering partnership. But even with all the love and determination in the world, they soon realized something else. They couldn't do it all alone. It became painfully clear. They needed help. The realization dawned on them one evening as Ifeoma sat on the couch, rocking the baby gently, her sigh heavy with the weight of the day. "Chucks," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't keep doing everything by myself. I need a break, even just for a few hours to focus on work." Chikwudi, who had just returned from a long day at the shop, wiped the sweat from his brow and nodded in weary agreement. The constant juggling was taking its toll on him too. "Who can help?" he asked, his mind racing through possibilities. A faint smile touched Ifeoma's lips. "My sister, Akoli. She's on holiday from school. Maybe she can stay with the baby for a few hours while I go to work." Relief flooded Chikwidi's face. He agreed immediately. "Perfect. I'll call her right now. If anyone can help us survive this, it's her." The thought of an extra pair of hands felt like a miracle. Akoli arrived the next morning, a whirlwind of bright-eyed, cheerful energy. She knew her sister was tired and was genuinely excited to spend time with her new nephew. "I've got this," she said with a confident smile, scooping the baby into her arms. "Go ahead, Ifeoma. Go get your work done. Don't worry about a thing." It was a small change, but it made a world of difference. For the first time in weeks, Ifeoma could leave the house without a cloud of worry hanging over her. She could meet with suppliers, take client measurements, and focus on her designs. Chikwudi could stay a little later at the print shop to finish urgent jobs without the gnawing guilt of leaving Ifeoma to handle everything alone. Even the baby seemed calmer, cooing happily in his aunt's arms. For the first time since giving birth, Ifeoma felt like she could finally breathe again. With Akoli's help, They quickly created a new routine, a shared schedule that brought a sense of order to their chaotic lives. In the mornings, Chiquity would open the shop while Ifioma prepared her sewing orders for the day. At midday, Akoli would arrive, ready to take over baby duty. This freed up the afternoons for Ifioma to work uninterrupted, while Chiquity handled deliveries and the business side of his shop. Then, in the evening, they would both return home. They'd care for the baby together, share dinner, and find a few quiet moments to just be with each other. It wasn't perfect, of course. Some days were still frantic, and some nights were still sleepless. But the shared responsibility lifted an immense weight from their shoulders. They were no longer drowning. They were a team, navigating the currents together. One evening, Ifioma returned from the fabric market, her arms full of colorful textiles. She paused at the doorway, a soft smile spreading across her face. On the balcony, she saw Chiquity and Akoli sitting together, the baby wrapped snugly in a blanket, smiling up at them as they made funny faces. The sound of their gentle laughter filled the air. She stepped out onto the balcony, her heart full. "You two are having too much fun without me," she teased. They all laughed, a warm, genuine sound that felt like home. In that simple moment of gratitude, Ifioma knew they were going to be okay. They had found their rhythm, their support system. Life had settled into a routine, but it was far from easy. Chiquity would open his shop, Chuck's Graphics, at the crack of dawn, handling clients who needed everything done yesterday. Ifioma would head to Fioma Collections, her sewing and fittings demanding her full attention, often racing against tight deadlines. Ifioma's sister, Akoli, was a blessing, helping with the baby whenever she could, but she was a relief, not a permanent solution. By the time the afternoon sun began to dip, both Chiquity and Ifioma would drag themselves home, completely drained. Some evenings, their conversations were just tired echoes. "How was your day? Did the baby sleep?" The exhaustion was a heavy blanket over their home. One evening, Ifioma walked in, her arms full of new fabrics. Chiquity had just finished a late delivery run. She let her bags drop to the floor with a soft thud. "I'm so tired, Chucks," she whispered. "I know," he replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Me too. Just go rest. I'll watch the baby for a bit." But the day's tension, coiled tight by fatigue, was ready to snap. "You never listen." Ifioma's voice was suddenly sharp. "I told you I wanted to go to the market early. You said you'd come with me, but you stayed at the shop." Chiquity frowned, his own tiredness making his words harsh. "I was handling urgent orders. Can't you understand that?" The argument wasn't loud or long, but the words hung in the air like a thick fog. They both knew it wasn't really about the market. It was about everything: the stress, the exhaustion, the constant pressure of juggling it all. These small misunderstandings began to pile up. Ifioma felt ignored when Chiquity worked late, feeling the weight of home life on her shoulders. Chiquity felt unappreciated when Ifioma pushed herself to sew, even when he was trying to handle deliveries to provide for them. Akoli tried to step in sometimes, but she was young with her own school commitments. Neither of them wanted to fight, but the constant strain made every little misstep feel like a monumental failure. One night, while preparing baby bottles, Ifioma's voice was barely a whisper. "I feel like we don't even see each other anymore." Tired and frustrated, Chiquity replied, "We see each other. I'm just trying to keep things running for all of us." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know. I just miss us." He paused, the raw honesty in her voice cutting through his exhaustion. He saw the same pain in her that he felt in himself. He gently took her hand. "Okay, let's find time. Even if it's small. 1 hour a day just for us. No shop, no sewing, no deliveries." Later that night, with their son sleeping peacefully, they sat together on the balcony, the city lights twinkling below. "Do you remember when we first met?" Ifioma asked softly. Chiquity managed a tired smile. "Under that mango tree in Succa?" She nodded. "We didn't know life would be this exhausting. But we also didn't know we'd be this strong," he said, squeezing her hand. "We're managing, babe. Slowly, but we are." In that quiet moment, they found comfort in a simple truth. Their love was still there, a steady flame that just needed a little more air, a little more patience, to burn brightly alongside their dreams. 2 years flew by in a blur of diapers, deadlines, and deliveries. Their son was now a whirlwind of energy, and their businesses had grown beyond their wildest expectations. Chiquitti's printing shop was flooded with bigger orders, while Ifeoma's fashion business was the go-to for every major event in town. Their small apartment, once a cozy nest of creativity, now felt like a chaotic hub where work and life collided. They adored their son, but they were running on fumes. The breaking point came one morning. Chiquitti was frantically packing orders while Ifeoma was ironing a mountain of bridesmaids' outfits. They glanced at their son, happily playing on the floor, and a heartbreaking truth settled over them. They couldn't give him the attention he deserved. "Chucks," Ifeoma said, her voice heavy with worry, "we can't keep this up. He's too young to be left on his own for hours. We need to find a safe place for him." Chiquitti rubbed his forehead, the lines of stress deepening. "I've been thinking the same thing. But where? We can't afford to stop working, and I won't leave him with just anyone." They looked at their son, whose infectious laughter now tugged at their hearts with a pang of guilt. They were building a future for him, but were they missing his present? Their search for a solution began. They thought about family, but Ifeoma's mother had her own health to manage. They interviewed a few nannies, but the cost and the question of trust felt like huge hurdles. They visited nearby daycares, but they were either too expensive or too far, adding more stress to their already packed schedules. Each option felt like a dead end, leaving them feeling more overwhelmed than before. One afternoon, Chiquitti looked at her tiredly but affectionately. "We're just making sure you survive the day, my love. You can't sew while carrying a baby." Akoli, ever the cheerful one, grinned. "Besides, someone has to teach him who the real boss is in this house." They all laughed, and for a moment, the weight on their shoulders lifted. It was in these moments of support that they began to see the bigger picture. Their love and their relentless hard work were the foundation, but they weren't enough to build a life on. Teamwork and family support were the pillars holding everything up. As the demands of their businesses, the recovery from childbirth, and the needs of a newborn threatened to pull them under, they found a rhythm. It was a small, imperfect, and sometimes chaotic rhythm, but it was theirs, and it was sustainable. It was never going to be easy. But in that small apartment, with Akoli helping out, the baby cooing contentedly, and two tired parents quietly holding hands, they understood something vital. Survival wasn't a solo race. It was a family effort. If you've ever felt the pressure of balancing dreams and family, let us know in the comments. "I don't want him just sitting in front of a TV all day. He needs care, attention, love." I know. We have to find a place that's safe and nurturing, not just convenient." The search for proper care was one of the most stressful things we'd ever been through. Some evenings, we'd argue quietly about affordability, quality, and schedules. Honestly, I felt guilty for leaving my son for even a few hours. And my husband, Chiquitti, felt frustrated that work pulled him away from the one thing he loved most. One evening, he sat beside me on the couch. Our son had just fallen asleep in my arms. "I feel like we're failing him." "No, we're trying. That counts. We just need the right support. Once we find it, we'll breathe easier." After a week of searching, we decided on a small, reputable creche near Chiquitti's shop. It was run by a kind, experienced woman who genuinely loved children. The cost was manageable, and we could check in any time. The decision didn't magically remove the guilt or the exhaustion, but it felt like a lifeline. We realized that sometimes, love also means making hard choices, like trusting someone else to care for your child while you ensure the family's survival. The first day our son went to the creche, he clung to me. Tears filled my eyes as Chiquitti whispered, "It's okay. He'll be fine. And so will we." By midday, we got a call from the creche. He was laughing, playing, and safe. That small reassurance allowed us to focus on work without panic. It reminded us that managing business and family required both sacrifice and smart decisions. At first, taking our son to the creche seemed like the perfect solution. The caregivers were kind, the environment was clean, and the teacher in charge of his class, Miss Adora, was gentle and patient. But as the weeks passed, the reality of business life began to press in harder. Chiquitti's printing orders were piling up, political flyers, business cards, wedding invitations, all with urgent deadlines. My fashion business boomed, too. Clients wanted last-minute fittings, urgent deliveries, and weekend appointments. The result? We often got to the creche late. The first few times, we arrived just minutes before closing. Miss Adora would smile politely and say, "No problem, sir, ma. He's been fine, just waiting for you." Our son would run into my arms, eyes sleepy, but so happy to see us. We'd apologize profusely. Sorry, Miss Adora, the traffic from New Haven was terrible, Chakotay would say. Or, I had to finish a customer's dress before church tomorrow, I would explain. Adora always smiled kindly. It's okay. I understand how busy you both are. He's a good boy. He never cries when the others go home. Soon, those occasional late pickups turned into a pattern. Almost every evening, we were the last parents to arrive. By 6:30 p.m., the creche would be empty. Toys packed away, chairs stacked, classrooms silent. Only one light stayed on in the baby room, where Adora sat with our son, reading him stories or humming lullabies. Sometimes he would doze off in her lap, clutching his small toy car, waiting patiently. When Chakotay or I finally arrived, Adora would hand him over with a tired but understanding smile. Don't worry, she'd say softly. He's fine. We've just been waiting together. Each late pickup came with a sting of guilt. I hated seeing my son as the last child in that room. Sometimes, as we drove home, I would just stare out the window silently. Chakotay would glance at me and say, Ife, we're trying our best. It's just for a while. Once business stabilizes, we'll close earlier. But deep down, we both knew that a while was stretching longer and longer. The days turned into weeks, and Adora became a familiar part of our evenings. She was always patient. She never complained, never scolded us. Sometimes she'd offer small updates. He ate well today. He was quiet during nap time. He helped me pack the toys after the others left. Her calmness made it easier for us to cope with our guilt. We started to trust her deeply, maybe a little too deeply. One evening, after another long day, Chakotay arrived to find the classroom already dark, except for one corner lamp. Adora sat on a mat, our son lying beside her, already half asleep. She looked up and smiled faintly. He was waiting for you, sir. Chakotay sighed. I'm so sorry again, Adora. Work just keeps me tied down. It's okay, she said softly. I understand. You and Madam are working so hard for him. He'll grow up proud of you. He smiled tiredly. Thank you. Really, you're a blessing to us. As he carried our sleeping son home that night, her words lingered in his mind. Comforting, but also quietly haunting. We felt blessed to have her, but we also started to wonder, how long could this go on? Were we taking her kindness for granted? We were about to find out in a way we never expected. Their small businesses, a print shop and a tailoring service, demanded every ounce of their energy, every minute of their day. This meant their little boy was often the last child left at the creche, a quiet little figure waiting in a room that had emptied hours ago. That night, watching her son sleep, Ifeoma's heart ached. She whispered to her husband, I don't like that we're always the last. He deserves better. Chakotay nodded, the weight of her words settling on him. You're right, he sighed. I'll try to close earlier this week. But promises are easy to make and hard to keep when survival is on the line. Orders kept pouring in, clients grew impatient, and they were trapped again in the same relentless cycle. And every single evening, Miss Adora, the kind teacher, was there. She was the last adult in the creche, patiently waiting with their little boy. She was a constant, a gentle presence in the quiet twilight of the classroom. Weeks blurred into months, and the late pickups became a routine they hated but couldn't seem to break. Miss Adora would read him picture books, sing soft songs, and help him draw little shapes on colored paper. She was always kind, always smiling. But kindness can sometimes hide the darkest secrets. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Chakotay and Ifeoma began to notice quiet changes in their son, small shifts that pricked at their parental instincts. At first, it was his greeting. The joyful dash to the door was replaced by a small, hesitant approach. He would cling to Miss Adora for a few extra seconds before finally stretching his arms toward his parents. He must really like his teacher, Ifeoma said once, forcing a faint smile. Chakotay agreed, but an uneasy feeling began to stir in his chest. Then came the exhaustion. Some evenings, their boy would fall asleep in the car before they even reached home. At the dinner table, he'd just push food around his plate, his eyes distant. One night, he looked at his mother, his small voice filled with a question that shattered her heart. Mummy, are you going to work tomorrow again? It was an innocent query, but it felt like an accusation. The long days at the creche started to take a physical toll. He caught colds more frequently and sometimes came home with low-grade fevers. Miss Adora would always reassure them. It's just the weather, Ma. He plays a lot. But Ifioma couldn't shake her worry. Maybe we're keeping him there too long, she confessed to Chakoti one night. He sighed, the exhaustion clear in his voice. I know, but how do we manage? If I close the shop early, we lose customers. If you stop taking fittings, we lose clients. A heavy silence fell between them as they watched their child sleep, caught in a trap they had built themselves. By the end of the term, their son's world seemed to revolve around his teacher. Miss Ada said I draw well, he'd announced with a proud grin. Miss Ada gave me biscuits today. Ifioma was grateful, truly, that someone cared for him so deeply while they were away. But with that gratitude came a sharp, piercing ache of distance. He's spending more time with her than with us, she whispered to Chakoti one night, the words tasting like guilt. Her husband's face was a mask of sorrow. We need to fix that, he said, his voice firm, before he forgets who we are. The wake-up call they so desperately needed came on a Friday. It was a perfect storm of lateness, terrible traffic, a sudden power outage at the shop, a last-minute fitting that couldn't be postponed. When they finally rushed into the creche, the sight that greeted them stopped them in their tracks. Their son was sitting quietly on Adaora's lap, his small head resting against her, his eyes drooping with sleep. Adaora offered a tired but kind smile. He waited a long time, she said softly, but he's fine. Ifioma took him into her arms, her apology a choked whisper. I'm sorry, baby. He mumbled against her shoulder, his voice thick with sleep. It's okay, Mummy. I knew you'd come. Those words, meant to be comforting, were like a knife to their hearts. On the drive home, the city lights flickered past in a blur. The silence in the car was deafening. Finally, Ifioma broke it, her voice trembling. He's getting used to being the last one there. That shouldn't feel normal for him. Chakoti's grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. You're right, he said, his voice thick with resolve. We have to do better. No more late pickups. Work can wait. That conversation was the turning point. The following week, they made real changes. Chakoti started delegating print jobs to his apprentice. Ifioma rescheduled her fittings to earlier in the day. It was a financial risk, but they knew the cost of not changing was far greater. For the first time in months, they arrived at the creche before closing time. Their son was still playing, his laughter mingling with the joyful shouts of other children. When he saw them, his face lit up. He ran to them, screaming with pure, unadulterated happiness. Mummy, Daddy, that sound, that beautiful, perfect sound, was a stark reminder of what they had been working for all along. They thought they had finally fixed the problem. They thought they were on the right path. They were wrong. The real nightmare was just beginning. One quiet Sunday evening, as Ifioma was giving her little boy a bath, her world tilted on its axis. As she gently washed him, she noticed something that made her breath catch in her throat. Faint, reddish lines along his private parts. They weren't bruises, not exactly. They were strange, almost deliberate marks. She frowned, rinsed the soap away, and looked again, her heart starting to pound. They were still there. Chakoti, she called, her voice barely a whisper. Her husband came into the bathroom, drying his hands on a towel. What is it? He asked, seeing the look on her face. She pointed, unable to speak. Chakoti crouched beside the tub, his brow furrowed. Maybe from playing too hard? You know how he climbs everything. But the uncertainty in his own voice betrayed his words. Their eyes met over their son's head, a silent, terrifying conversation passing between them. That shared glance, the universal language of parents who sense that something is profoundly wrong. After they dressed him, Ifioma held him close on her lap. Her own heartbeat felt deafening in the quiet room. Sweetheart, she began, her voice calm and gentle. Did you fall down at school? Or did someone hit you in that area? Her son looked away, his little legs swinging back and forth. I don't know, he murmured, his voice tiny. She tried again, fighting the panic rising in her chest. It's okay, you can tell Mummy and Daddy. We just want to help. But he retreated into a wall of silence. Later that night, Chakoti whispered. Ifioma's heart began to race. She called Chakoti from the bedroom, her voice trembling. He knelt beside them, listening as their son repeated the horrifying words he had learned at the creche. The air in the room changed. It became heavy, still, almost impossible to breathe. Chakoti's fists clenched, his face turning pale with disbelief. Overwhelmed, Ifioma broke down in tears. Within minutes, Chakoti was on the phone, his voice shaking as he called a family friend who worked in the local police division. "This can't wait," he said firmly. "We need to go there right now." They quickly dressed their son, carried him to the car, and drove straight to the station. There, they filed a formal report. The officers listened with grave attention, assuring them the matter would be investigated immediately. The very next day, Chikwudi, accompanied by 2 officers, went to the creche. The atmosphere was tense. Children were playing outside as usual, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. The teacher, Miss Adora, looked startled when she saw them walk in with the police. The head teacher came out, confused. "What's going on?" she asked. The officers spoke calmly but firmly, explaining that a serious report had been filed and an investigation was necessary. Miss Adora was taken into custody for questioning regarding the abuse of a little boy. Ifeoma could barely stand. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched her son tightly to her chest. Chikwudi stood beside her, silent and composed, his jaw tight with anger and resolve. The investigation took its course. Statements were collected from everyone involved, parents were interviewed, and the terrible truth slowly began to unfold. The community buzzed with shock and disbelief. No one could imagine such a thing happening in a place they had all trusted with their children. Back at home, Ifeoma and Chikwudi shifted their entire focus to their son. Business no longer mattered. Deadlines, orders, money, everything seemed meaningless compared to his well-being. They took turns spending every moment with him, reading stories, taking long walks, and simply allowing him to talk or play whenever he wanted, creating a safe space for him to heal. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of their home, Ifeoma whispered to her husband, "I can't believe we were so busy we didn't see it sooner." He took her hand gently. "Don't blame yourself," he said. "We trusted the wrong person. What matters now is that he's safe, and we'll never let anything like this happen again." In the weeks that followed, they pulled their son out of the creche completely. Chikwidi's younger cousin, a kind university student on break, came to live with them and help care for their child at home. They completely reorganized their businesses so that at least one of them was always present, always available. Slowly but surely, their son began to smile again. Genuine, bright, carefree smiles that had been missing for too long. Every night, as they put him to bed, Chikwudi and Ifeoma would sit quietly by his side, vowing to never again let work or exhaustion come between them and their child. The home that once buzzed with constant work and business calls became quieter, almost sacred. The hum of Ifeoma's sewing machine fell silent most days. Chikwudi handed over the daily management of his printing shop to his apprentice, only visiting occasionally. They needed this silence. They needed each other. Most of all, they needed to give their little boy a chance to feel safe again in his own world. Their new routine was simple and filled with love. Mornings began with laughter, with breakfast on the balcony and the sound of birds chirping. Ifeoma would fry plantain while her son watched cartoons, his happy giggles echoing through their small flat. Chikwudi would often join him on the floor, building toy cars from bottle caps and cardboard. At first, Ifeoma worried they were spoiling him, but a kind psychologist at the community clinic reassured them. "He needs consistency, warmth, and attention," she explained. "That's how children learn to trust again." So, that is exactly what they gave him, an abundance of love and unwavering presence. In this quiet space, Ifeoma and Chikwudi began to rediscover each other, not just as business partners, but as husband and wife. By the time their son turned 4, the laughter that had once filled their home had returned, ringing through the halls like a long-lost melody. He was cheerful again, confident, always running to his parents with incredible stories about his toys and his latest crayon masterpieces. He was their little boy again, a beacon of pure, unadulterated joy. Ifeoma and Chikwudi watched him one evening, lost in his world of creation. He was building a magnificent tower from colorful wooden blocks, and the warm, golden sunlight of the late afternoon spilled across the floor, painting the scene in a soft, gentle glow. It was a perfect moment, a snapshot of peace they had yearned for. "He's okay now," Ifeoma whispered, her voice thick with emotion, a mix of relief and profound gratitude. She leaned her head on Chikwidi's shoulder, feeling the solidness of him, the shared journey they had endured. Chikwudi nodded, his eyes never leaving their son. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "And so are we." The past still lingered, of course. It was a shadow in the corners of their minds, a quiet reminder of the storm they had weathered. but it no longer defined them. It no longer held power over their present. They had walked through fire, as individuals grappling with their own fears and anxieties, as parents, navigating a path they never imagined, and as a family holding on to each other when everything else seemed to be falling apart. Through that crucible, they had forged something new, something stronger. They had learned the quiet strength of patience, the unyielding power of unconditional love, and the vital importance of awareness, of seeing, of listening, of truly being present. The journey taught them that some wounds heal not by being forgotten, but by being integrated into the story of who you are, a testament to what you have overcome. Their home was not just a house anymore. It was a sanctuary built on a foundation of resilience, each laugh and every shared glance a testament to their victory. They were more than just survivors. They were a family reborn, stronger and more deeply connected than ever before. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this moment with us. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories of hope and resilience.